What began as just another ordinary subway ride for Sylvester Stallone was about to become a moment the world wouldn't stop talking about. You won't believe what happened next, or how it turned everything on its head. Stay with us until the end, because this story will leave you speechless. And if it moves you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support means the world to us. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. Sylvester Stallone sat quietly on a worn plastic seat, his Yankees cap pulled low over his face, a simple hoodie masking the fame he'd spent decades trying to escape from. The subway hummed around him, the metallic groan of the tracks echoing through the car like a lullaby of the underground. It dulled the senses of the tired commuters around him, the rhythm oddly comforting. Stallone's eyes scanned the car with the quiet precision of someone who'd seen too much of the world to be easily surprised. No cameras, no fans, no press. For the first time in what felt like forever, he was just another face in the crowd, and he liked it that way. The subway smelled like metal, worn leather, and the faint trace of someone's forgotten fast food. He leaned back in his seat, eyes half closed, letting the movement of the train wash over him. It had been years since he felt this free. No directors barking orders, no flashing lights capturing every glance, every mistake. Just him, a man with a past, surrounded by strangers who didn't know or care who he was. But that quiet moment didn't last. At the next stop, the doors creaked open and a wave of new passengers spilled in. Among them was a young man in a gray hoodie, the drawstrings pulled tight around his face. His eyes darted back and forth, restless, twitchy, scanning the crowd like he was looking for something to provoke. Stallone saw it immediately. That kind of energy. He'd seen it in alleys and dressing rooms, in back lots and broken homes. The kind of energy that meant trouble. The young man's gaze locked onto a target. An elderly black woman, maybe late 60s or early 70s, slowly stepped onto the train. She held a large, overstuffed purse tightly against her chest. Her movements were cautious, deliberate, and her old shoes scuffed softly across the floor as she tried to find a seat. No one moved to offer her one. Stallone felt a flicker of irritation. The woman looked around, hopeful. Her eyes stopped briefly on a few open seats, but no one looked up. No one budged. Her shoulders drooped, just slightly. And Stallone felt something inside him tighten. Stallone watched all of it. The way she tried not to let the disappointment show. The way she held her bag tighter, like it carried her last threads of dignity. He was about to stand and offer his seat when the kid in the hoodie moved, swift, almost eager. For half a second, Stallone thought maybe the kid was going to help her, but the tone in his voice erased that hope in an instant. "Move it, Grandma," the kid sneered, stepping into her path. She blinked, startled. "I said move," he repeated, louder now, his shoulder nudging hers. The old woman tried to shift around him, but he blocked her again. A few heads turned. Nobody spoke. Stallone's jaw flexed, and his fingers slowly curled into a loose fist on his lap. The kid looked around with a grin that begged for attention. "Look at this lady, carrying a whole house in this ugly bag. What you got in there, Grandma? Bricks? Rocks? Your dusty old cat?" Some passengers chuckled, nervously, superficially. Others averted their eyes or sank deeper into their phones. The woman didn't answer. She just clutched her bag tighter and tried to inch past him again. That's when he reached out, fast and sudden, and yanked it from her grip. The bag hit the floor with a hollow, heavy thud. She gasped. "Hey, that's mine!" she cried, her voice more fear than fury. The kid picked up the bag and held it above her head like a trophy. "What's in it, huh? 1,000 crossword puzzles?" She reached for it, and he pulled it back, laughing. Stallone stood up. The car shifted. Not physically, but atmospherically. The air tightened. He didn't say a word at first. He just walked, one step at a time, toward the kid. The leather jacket creaked with each movement. He wasn't fast. He didn't need to be. The kid noticed him when he was just a few feet away. He turned, squinting. "Yo, what's your problem, old man?" Stallone lifted the brim of his cap just enough for the kid to see his face. Recognition flickered like a match in the kid's eyes. "Wait, are you—" "Put it down," Stallone said, voice low, steady, the weight of gravel and resolve in his tone. The subway car went silent. A woman 2 rows over lowered her phone mid-recording. A man in a suit shifted uncomfortably. No one laughed anymore. "Chill, man. It's just a joke," the kid said, half smiling, trying to play it off. "Do I look like I'm laughing?" The question cut like a knife. The kid faltered, then slowly lowered the bag to the ground. "Now apologize," Stallone said. The kid looked around for help, but the audience he'd courted seconds ago was gone. Nobody met his eyes. He exhaled sharply. "Sorry," he mumbled, louder. "Sorry," he barked, eyes wide now. "Get on the ground." "What?" "Face down, hands behind your head. You're not a cop." "You're right, I'm not. But I'm standing between you and a much worse version of justice. You want to gamble on the other one?" The kid froze, sizing him up, then slowly dropped to his knees and lay flat, hands behind his head. The woman backed into a seat, her bag now safe in her lap. Her eyes trembled with the same disbelief as everyone else. She whispered, "Thank you." But Stallone didn't respond. He just stood over the kid, arms folded, breath steady. Then he turned to the rest of the train. "Call the police," he said. No one moved. "Now." A few phones came out again, this time with apps open to 911. The train kept moving, but the silence inside the car was heavy, like the air itself was ashamed. Some people pretended to look out the window. A few whispered. One man adjusted his tie and tried to disappear behind a newspaper he'd already read. The woman, who they would later learn, was named Mrs. Dorothy Lee, a retired nurse from Germantown, gripped her bag with both hands, her fingers twitching slightly. Her eyes locked on Stallone's, then down to the kid, still lying face down on the stained floor. The train rumbled on through the underground, but no one on board would forget what had just happened. Because for once, someone didn't look away. The rumble of the train faded into the background as the mood in the subway car thickened with something unspeakable. Shame, maybe, or reflection. Nobody knew quite what to do next. Phones were still held awkwardly in trembling hands. Some passengers stared at the floor, as if trying to disappear into it. Others looked to the windows, though there was nothing out there but darkness and the blurred streaks of underground light. Stallone remained standing, arms crossed, feet planted like the trunk of an old tree. His eyes never left the young man lying flat on the cold subway floor. The kid's hoodie had bunched up at the neck, and his breathing came fast and shallow. It was bravado that had gotten him into this mess, and now the only thing he had left was fear. Sylvester had seen that look before, in locker rooms, on sets, in alleys behind bars after hours. But this wasn't a movie. There were no retakes. This was real. The old woman, Mrs. Dorothy Lee, now sat quietly in her seat. Her hands rested atop her bag like a mother keeping watch over a sleeping child. She didn't cry, but something in her posture had changed. Her back, which had been slightly hunched from age and exhaustion, now seemed a little straighter. She looked over at Stallone and gave him a nod, not the kind people gave celebrities, but the kind two people gave each other when they understood something without words. Across the aisle, a woman in a long coat shifted in her seat, finally breaking the silence. "Is someone calling the cops or not?" she asked, her voice brittle. A man in a navy blazer cleared his throat. "I did," he muttered without lifting his gaze. "They said they're sending someone to meet us at the next stop." His voice carried guilt, as though he were trying to absolve himself. Stallone gave a brief nod, then turned back to the kid on the floor. "You hear that?" he said, voice still calm but with the weight of granite. "Cops are on their way. So think real hard about how you're going to explain this." The kid mumbled something into the floor. Stallone leaned closer, catching just enough. "I didn't even do anything. She dropped it. It was just a joke." He raised an eyebrow and squatted down so their faces were closer. "You shoved her. You mocked her. You ripped that bag out of her hands. 20 people saw it. You think that's a joke?" The kid didn't respond. His eyes flicked from Stallone's face to the curious glances, still darting around the car. The same crowd that had laughed before was now silent, almost reverent. It was like a spell had been broken, but no one knew what to do with the silence left behind. The train began to slow as the robotic voice crackled over the intercom. "Next stop, 15th Street. Doors will open on the right." The brakes screamed slightly as the train eased into the platform. Stallone didn't move. His eyes stayed on the kid. "Don't try anything," he said, sharp and quiet, more like a growl than a threat. "You move, I swear." But the sentence didn't need to finish. The young man's face tightened, his muscles twitching like he was weighing every possible escape. But something in Stallone's eyes made it clear that running wasn't an option. Not today. As the doors opened, a rush of cool morning air filled the car. 2 uniformed officers stood waiting on the platform, looking inside with quick, trained eyes. They spotted the kid immediately, and one stepped forward. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice practiced, neutral. Stallone stood and stepped aside, pointing without drama. "This one shoved a woman and stole her bag. She's right there." The officer looked at Dorothy, who lifted a trembling hand, but said nothing. The other officer knelt beside the kid and pulled him to his feet. "Hands behind your back." The kid protested. Of course he did. But it was the weak kind of protest that even he didn't believe in. "She dropped it. I didn't steal nothing. It was a joke." The cuffs clicked anyway. They always did. As the kid was let out, the passengers slowly began to stir. Someone stood to get off the train. Another quietly packed up their laptop. A man near the doors reached for his briefcase, sneaking one last glance at Stallone before pretending he hadn't been watching. The police disappeared with the kid into the noise of the station, leaving behind the echo of their authority. Stallone exhaled through his nose, the adrenaline beginning to slip out of his bones. He looked back at Mrs. Lee. She was still watching him, her bag now pulled tight to her chest, her expression softer than before. "Thank you," she said again, her voice steadier now. "Not just for me, for all the times nobody else did." Stallone nodded, then returned to his seat across from her. The train lurched forward, pulling them back into the tunnel. The moment was over, but the echo remained. He leaned back against the window, arms crossed again, gaze drifting out toward the flashing tunnel lights. Across from him, Dorothy kept her eyes down. Her fingers traced slow, shaky lines, over the fabric of her bag. It wasn't fear anymore, just habit. Stallone could see it in her face. That quiet alertness. The way people get when the world teaches them too many lessons about being alone in the wrong place. He tilted his head slightly. "You all right?" he asked, his voice lower now, not like the one he'd used on the kid. This one was gentler, meant for someone who deserved care. She looked up, surprised, then smiled, faint but genuine. "I've been through worse, sweetheart," she said, nodding. "But today, it almost broke me." She let out a breath, one that seemed to carry decades of weight. "Most folks, they just watch. You didn't." Stallone didn't say anything at first. He looked around the train. Some passengers were still sneaking glances. A few had their phones out again, but not to call the police this time. He could tell. Camera lenses pointed too conveniently in his direction, fingers hovering. He'd seen it before. Always started with a whisper, a nudge, a look. Then the photo requests came. Then the headlines. He felt the shift happening again, like a movie he didn't want to be cast in. The woman sitting near the back leaned forward, squinting. "Wait, is that him?" someone whispered. Another voice joined in, younger, excited. "Yo, I think that's Stallone. Like, the Stallone." A few heads turned. The quiet wasn't so quiet anymore. He pulled the brim of his cap down just a little, as if that might somehow undo it, but it never worked. "Mr. Stallone!" a man in business casual called out from 3 rows down. "What you did back there? Man, that was badass." The words hung in the air like a smoke alarm nobody turned off. He didn't answer. He just nodded faintly and kept his eyes on the wall. The old woman watched the scene unfold with a kind of amusement that only comes with age and perspective. She leaned forward, whispering just loud enough for him to hear. "They only see the flash," she said, "not the fight." He turned to look at her. She smiled knowingly. "You did what needed to be done. Doesn't matter if they caught it on camera." He smiled faintly, his first real smile all morning. The train rattled forward again, deeper into the tunnel, carrying with it a handful of strangers who'd all just witnessed something they couldn't quite name. Some would call it a moment of justice. Others would say it was courage. But for Sylvester Stallone, it wasn't any of those things. It was just what you're supposed to do when the moment comes and nobody else is willing. He sat in silence as the phone in his jacket buzzed to life. The messages were already coming in. He didn't have to look to know what they said. The subway kept moving, its wheels grinding against metal, echoing through the narrow tunnel like a heart beating after a long sprint. Stallone sat quietly in his seat, arms folded, eyes lowered but mind in motion. His phone buzzed again, then again. He didn't need to check it. He knew. Someone had already uploaded the video. He could imagine the title. Sylvester Stallone Stops Subway Robbery, Real-Life Hero. Maybe there'd be dramatic music playing in the background, slow motion effects. Maybe someone would crop out the woman entirely, just him standing over the kid. That's how it always went. People didn't want the truth. They wanted a headline, a clip, a meme. Across from him, Dorothy sat calmly, her fingers no longer trembling, her bag clutched gently in her lap, like it was finally allowed to be still. She looked out the window, where nothing passed but a blur of shadows. Then she looked at him. He could feel it, that gaze that wasn't looking at a celebrity, but at a man. "They're going to turn this into a story about you," she said softly. "Not about what happened, not about what it meant. Just you." He didn't answer right away. His throat tightened. He looked at her, her face lined with decades, eyes clear and tired and wise. "Yeah," he muttered. "They always do." She gave a slow nod, not of agreement, but understanding. "Don't let them write the ending," she added, her voice steady like it came from deep inside her bones. "Tell it yourself, before they twist it into something you won't recognize." Her words stuck to him, like paint on raw wood. At the next stop, she stood slowly, motioning to the door. The train had reached her destination, Erie Station. She paused by his seat. "You did good today," she said simply. "But more than that, you saw me." That last sentence pierced him in a way no camera ever could. He stood up, tipped his cap slightly, and watched her step out into the sunlight. She walked slowly but proudly, like someone who had been broken 1,000 times and chose, every single time, to put herself back together. The doors closed behind her with a soft click, and Stallone sat back down, alone again. By the time the train reached the final stop, his phone had buzzed over 12 times. Texts, emails, missed calls. Some from his publicist, some from friends, most from people he hadn't heard from in years. The internet moved faster than the truth ever could. A teenage boy, seated 2 rows down, finally worked up the nerve to speak. "Hey man, you really Stallone?" he asked, phone in hand, camera app open, not even pretending to be subtle. Stallone looked at him for a long second. "Yeah," he said simply. "Can I get a pic?" the kid asked. Stallone didn't answer. He stood and walked off the train, the click of his boots echoing down the concrete platform. By noon, the video had racked up 500,000 views. By evening, every major outlet was running it. CNN had his face under a headline. "Stallone stops subway assault. Real-life Rocky?" TMZ's headline was more dramatic. "He doesn't just fight on screen. Watch Stallone lay down the law underground." He scrolled through his phone in his apartment, standing at the window, the skyline of Philadelphia stretching before him like a theater set, waiting for a scene to begin. His inbox was flooded. Late-night shows wanted him. Daytime talk shows. Inspirational podcasts. Everyone wanted a soundbite, a quote, a smile. But he hadn't smiled since that train ride. Not really. He set the phone down, staring out at the city lights, and remembered what Dorothy had said. Don't let them write the ending. He walked to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, took a long sip, and then, after what felt like an hour, picked the phone back up. He opened the camera app. No filters, no lights. Just him, tired eyes and all. He hit record. "You've probably seen the video by now," he began, voice quiet, deep. "And you've probably seen the headlines too. They're calling me a hero. They're saying I stopped a robbery. But I need you to understand something." He paused, eyes locked on the lens. "That story wasn't about me. It was about a woman who got on the train just trying to get somewhere safely. A woman who was shoved, insulted, humiliated, while people watched, while people recorded, and no one stepped in. Not until it went too far." He leaned forward, his face filling the frame. "I'm not proud that I was the one who stopped it. I'm ashamed that I was the only one who did." He sat back, breath steady. "We talk a lot in this country about what it means to be brave. We wear flags, post quotes, say the right things online. But when the moment comes, when someone needs help, what do? Do we scroll? Do we film? Or do we stand?" His voice tightened. "Don't call me a hero. That word doesn't belong to me. The only reason this story exists is because we've created a culture where doing the right thing feels like something extraordinary. It shouldn't be. He ended the video with a single sentence. Next time you see something wrong, don't wait, don't film, don't scroll. He hit upload. No caption, no hashtags, just truth. Within minutes, comments flooded in. Some called him inspirational. Others confessed that they'd watched the original video and had felt sick realizing they might have been one of the people who stayed quiet. Teachers shared it in classrooms. Parents showed it to their kids. The phrase, "don't scroll, do," began trending. Later that night, he received a text from an unknown number. It was short. "You told the right story. Thank you, it was signed, D." He smiled, knowing exactly who it was. He closed his phone and set it aside, not caring how many more messages came in. The city outside was quiet. In that silence, he felt something lift off his chest. Not the weight of fame or the noise of media, but the burden of having watched too many people look away. This time, he hadn't. Somewhere across town, Dorothy Lee sat by her window, sipping tea from a chipped white mug, the same bag resting beside her chair. She'd seen the video. She saw how he spoke, not as an actor, but as a man. And for the first time in a long while, she believed maybe someone had finally remembered how to look her in the eye. Back in his apartment, Stallone stared out at the dark, his reflection barely visible in the glass. He thought about all the times he had played a fighter, a survivor, a symbol of strength. But it wasn't those roles that defined him. It was this moment, unwritten, unscripted, unplanned. And as the glow of the city lights danced across the skyline, he whispered to himself the same thing he'd told millions just hours earlier. Don't let them write the ending. Because sometimes, to change the story, you just have to live it the way it should have been written.